Welcome everyone to VisionRecordingStudios.com. Today we're going to talk about setting up a blank song template, what I call a blank mix template in Studio One Pro 2.5. And this is very useful for if you do a lot of mixing of songs for other people, and people send you their songs that they recorded in Studio One or Pro Tools or Cubase or Logic or any of the DAWs that are out there. They will typically send you WAV files, and you'll bring those WAV files into your Studio One project to begin a mix. And each and every time you have to import all your files and set up create your new song, set it all up so you get ready to mix that project. And one thing that could be very helpful for you is if you set up a blank template, so you always open up that same blank template each and every time before you import your audio files. And this way you don't have to start from scratch. And this is something that I do on each and every mix that I approach. I start off with this template that I'm going to show you. So this is how you create a blank template in Studio One Pro 2.5. So we're at the Studio One homepage. We're going to create a new song, okay? And we're going to go to the location on your hard drive where you want to create that new song. And I'm going to do this right now. Put this into my Studio One under songs. And for now, I'm just going to leave it here. I'm going to say open. And then I am going to name it. And we could just name this mix template. Vision. This can all stay the same. You don't need to worry about that for now. Just hit OK. And we're going to have a blank template. So the very first thing I do is I go over to File and I go to Save as Template. And we're going to name the template. And here it is, Mix Template Vision. You can put a description. Blank mix template. You can add an icon if you wish. If you already had an existing template that you were updating that you wanted to replace, you would just hit replace existing. But for now, just hit OK. So now we know that we've saved it and we're starting off with our blank mix template. So the very first thing I do is I want to add a bunch of mono audio tracks and a bunch of stereo audio tracks. So when I import my audio files from my client, I just dump them onto these tracks. So I'm going to create, just for a nice round number, 16 mono tracks. So I'm just going to go into this gray area here, right click, add tracks. And we're going to do 16 of them. We're going to call these M tracks because these are going to be mono tracks, M for mono. 16, they're audio tracks. Color coded. You can either auto color them or you can pick any color. I like to separate my colors from my mono and my stereo. So for my mono tracks, maybe I'll just pick a green. This is a mono track, no presets, no nothing. So we're just gonna hit OK. So now we have 16 mono audio tracks. We could just shrink these up here. And if I had more than 16 audio files for a particular session, obviously I can add more. If I had less than 16 mono audio files to import, I would delete some, but this gives me a good starting point. Now I'm going to create a couple of stereo tracks. Let's go add tracks, and we're going to create stereo tracks, so we'll just call this S tracks. And I'm going to do 2 of them. That's typically enough. Usually stereo tracks are for keyboards and with most of my clients. But this is now, we're going to switch this from mono to stereo. And we'll change the color code so it looks different than the mono tracks. Just hit OK. So now we have a couple of stereo tracks. So we have 16 mono, which would take care of drums, bass, guitars, vocals, a couple of stereo tracks for some keyboards or piano and whatnot. So that's the very first thing I do. The very next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our mixer by clicking on this mix button. And as you can see, here's all our mono tracks, and here's our 2 stereo tracks. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 4 group tracks for routing things like drum kits all to one bus, guitars maybe all to one bus, vocals all to one bus, keyboards all to one bus. So I'm going to add a couple of 4 bus tracks here. So in this gray area here, I'm just going to, in the mixer section, I'm just going to right click, and we're going to add a bus channel. You can see it here at the end. Okay, mono bus channel. And I'm going to do that a couple of times here. I'm going to add 2, 3, 4. So now I have 4 bus channels that I can move anywhere I want just by highlighting it. If I wanted to say put it over here, I could put it over here if these were all drums. and I wanted to dump those into this bus channel so I can control the whole drum kit with one fader. I can do that. But for now, I'm just going to leave them here at the end. So I have 4 bus channels, or group channels. I call them bus channels in Studio One, or you could look at them as group channels if you're coming from another DAW. So we have 16 mono channels, we have 2 stereo tracks, and now we have 4 group channels or bus channels. Next thing I'm going to do is add a couple of effects channels for like reverb, delay, so on and so forth. So again, I'm going to right click, we're going to add effects channels. So I'm going to add 1, 2, and I'll always start off with 3 effects channels. Again, it could be for reverb, it could be for delays, it could be for, you know, choruses, any effect that you're going to use to say as an effect send. You could set up on these channels, and you could see them down here, effects 1, 2, 3, and then here's our bus channels, and then here's all our stereo and our mono tracks. Okay, so now I have a basic template of the amount of tracks that I'm going to use. And again, you could delete or add to these things depending on your particular project, but this gets you a good starting point. Now, the next thing I do is I know from my workflow that in every single one of my mono tracks, I'm going to have a couple of go-to plugins that I'm going to put on every single track. No matter what the audio file is, I'm going to work with these couple of plugins, and I'll show you that in a second. And the same thing with my main bus. So the first thing is on my main output bus, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to add a couple of my go-to inserts. There's 3 inserts, 3 effects that I use on my stereo bus, each and every mix. So I'm going to go to my effects tab, and I am going to my Slate Digital plugin. And the very first thing I add in my mixes is the Slate Digital Virtual Console Collection, the mix bus, which you can see right here, and I just turn it on. This is the Slate Digital Virtual Console. They call it the VCC. Go out to slatedigital.com and check it out so you can learn more about it. I'll do a review on this product at one point. It's an awesome old school console collection. 5 different consoles. The Brit K is an SSL. The Trident, the RC Tube, the Brit N is a Neve, and the USA is an API. And I typically will always set it to the Neve. I love the Neve sound, and I usually will drive that console about 3 dB. And again, this is all adjustable, but I always use this plugin on my mix bus, so I'm going to add that. The next thing I always use is a mix bus compressor, and I use a product from Universal Audio, and I use a Neve compressor. So I'm going to take my Neve compressor, going to put that after my Neve console. So here's my Neve stereo bus compressor, and I start off with using a preset. And again, I adjust this depending on the music that I'm working with, but again, it starts me in the right direction. So now I have the virtual console collection, and I have the compressor, and the next thing I use, again, is by Slate Digital, called the virtual tape machines. And here we are. So we're dumping down to tape, and I just kind of leave everything at its default settings. So those are the 3 plugins that I always put on my stereo bus. So I set it up as a template, so it's always there each and every time I load the template. I don't have to go through the process that I just showed you. So that's on the mix bus. On the mono tracks, I use a couple of the same plugins, and let me show you. So we can change our view in our mixer from here to here just by clicking on that button, and that'll bring up all our inserts, and you can expand this a little bit, I believe. Yeah, you can expand this so you can see things a little bit better. Here's the plugins we put on the stereo bus, mount the bus out. So I'm going to scroll all the way over to the first track, the first mono track, and typically, you know, these would be my drum tracks, my kick, my snare, my hi-hats, my toms, my overheads, my rooms. But anyhow, I take the very first plugin that I use on any mono audio source is the Slate Digital Virtual Tape Machines. So again, I open that up, and I put these across all the tracks. So what's great about Studio One is you could just take this and just drag it, and it opens right to the next track. You have to keep closing it every time, which is a little bit of a pain. You wish you would be able to, it would just one click, it wouldn't open unless you wanted it to open, but I guess it automatically opens when you drop the plugin in, which kind of makes sense, I guess. But so anyhow, so I drag it in, I put it across all my stereo and my mono tracks. So all my tracks, all 18 tracks, are going to start off with a virtual tape machine. Okay, so there's all 18 channels. We don't want to do the buses and the effects channels. Okay, so I got the virtual tape machine. I'm going to do the same thing with the virtual console, which looks a little different than the mix bus. So here it is here. So we're going to go back to track 1, and the next thing I do is open up the Slate Digital Virtual Console, and again I just turn it on, and I make sure it's set to the Neve, and it's set to plus 3 dB, which is what I want. And again, let me just do a quick save on this, and then I'm going to just drag these across all the channels. So all my audio hits the virtual tape machine, gets in that nice tape saturation, old analog type sound, and then goes into the virtual console, so it emulates going through a real Neve console. Which again, if you have never checked out the Slate Digital products, I would highly suggest that you do. The virtual tape machine and the virtual console collection are by far the two best plugins I've ever purchased, regardless of the DAW you're using, and they're very, very reasonably priced. I believe the virtual tape machine today runs for about 129 or 139 bucks as the making of this video, and the virtual console collection I believe is less than $200, and they're always running specials and sales over there at slatedigital.com. I'll put the link up on the screen so you can kind of see it and go check it out. Very, very good plugins. And when you're mixing with these plugins and you take them away to kind of A/B a mix with and without these plugins engaged, you'll hear the difference, a world of difference. They sound fantastic. So all my channels get those two plugins each and every time. And my mix bus always gets these three plugins: the virtual mix bus, the tape machine, and the Neve, Universal Audio Neve mix bus compressor. Okay, so now that I have all that set up, and again, I don't add the reverbs and delays. Some people say on my effects channels you could put a reverb, put a delay. I don't do that because it really depends on the type of music and the style and the song itself and what kind of reverb, what kind of delay I'm going to use. So I just leave those blank, and I'll add those later. But I always run everything through the Slate Digital plug, so I want to put those on first. So that's kind of how I set up my template. So now I'm going to go back to File, again, Save As Template. I'm going to go replace the existing, and I'm going to see my templates here, and I'm just going to click on it and say OK. So it's the Mix Template Vision, the blank Mix Template. Hit OK. OK, and now I can just save this and close it. And now when I go back to create a new song in Studio One, if I launch, if now let's say, okay, I have my template all set up, I'm about to create a new song in Studio One because a client has sent me some audio files and I want to get their mix started. So what would I do? I could just go to create a new song, go to User, the User tab, and you can pick your template, and here it is. Mix Template Vision, and that would be my Vision template. I would choose the direct, choose the hard drive that I want to put this mix on for this client. So I'd go to my Studio One folder, and I'd go to my Songs folder, and I would just say, okay, I'm going to put the next folder is going to be set up right in here for this particular song, and we're going to name it, and let's just call this Mix Template Lesson. And hit OK, and now I picked my blank Vision template that we created, and you're going to see it's going to load up all the plugins, it's going to load up all the bus channels, all the effects channels that we had. It'll take a second here. So you can see it's going through all the virtual consoles and all the virtual tape machines because it's on 18 different tracks as well as the mix buses. And here it is. So now we have our blank template that's opened, and now you can go ahead and start importing your songs, and you could start mixing your clients' projects. So you don't now have to import everything, create all the tracks every time, and then I got to go in and drag all these insert effects and set up my mix bus. It's already set up. So every time I start a mix, I have it completely set up the way I want it, and it's ready to go with all my tracks here on the side. And again, if I have to add tracks or take tracks away, I can do that, but they have the basic framework all set up here. So hope that was helpful for some people. Again, check us out at visionrecordingstudios.com for more videos about recording tips and training. Also check out the homestudiotrainer.com. Johnny over there is focused primarily on Studio One and Presouns stuff, and he does a great job catering to the newbie, to the beginner. people who are just getting into recording that need help. How do I get started? That's kind of what I do, and I'm working with Johnny, and we're working together to try to bring some training and some advice and some help to the absolute beginner to take the feeling of being completely overwhelmed when you're first getting into this recording and mixing and such, to try to help you along and guide you along and show you you know, how to get started without feeling completely overwhelmed and spending money on things you don't need, so on and so forth. So anyway, till next time, I hope this was helpful. Again, place a comment on our YouTube page, shoot me an email at visionrecordingstudios@yahoo.com if you have any questions pertaining to this video or anything else I'm recording, and I'd be more than happy to help you. Until next time, take care.